Thank you very much, Richard. Okay, we'll move on to the main program of the evening, and I'd like to invite Stewart Ferguson, China-Britain British Council, to move to make his presentation. Stewart is located in the East Midlands, covers the east of England, East Midlands and West Midlands for the China-Britain Business Council. But most important of all, Stewart is originally from Pontypool, so that's the important news. So he speaks Mandarin, but I think the presentation is probably
in English, and I don't speak Welsh, no. Yeah, as was said, yes, Stewart Ferguson, very Scottish-sounding name, English accent, but my birth certificate is in Welsh, and it says Pontypool on my passport. But I was only here till 3, and then moved to Yorkshire. I think I would have preferred to have stayed in Wales. Okay. Thank you very much. What we're here to do today is really talk about some research that we did on behalf of the Welsh Assembly Government early this year, looking at some of the priority sectors which are important to Welsh businesses, and really to find out what matching opportunities, if any, there are in China. However, I'm just going to start off by giving a sort of picture of where China is. If people here are already doing business in China, I hope I don't have to go through the 1.3 billion people area the size of America. But it is useful to say things like when approaching the China markets, and it relates to being referred to as an expert. I don't think many people at CBBC see themselves as experts because it's too big a place. It's too big a market. It's too complicated. There are people who know a region very well or know an industry very well. But to find anyone who says they're an expert on China, take it with a pinch of salt if they claim to be so. If you think of China more as the United States of America, and Beijing is Washington, and Shanghai is New York, and Guangdong is California, then it sort of might give you a better impression of what China is about and the diversity that exists across China. So I'm just going to cover some of these subjects. Basically, what we're doing, what UK is doing with China at the moment, what are the market trends over the next sort of 10, 15 years, then cover an introduction to the 4 reports that we've done for the Welsh Assembly Government, and then back again to a bit of CBBC, and if time, any questions. Okay, so what does China buy from the UK? If you believe the national press, Britain doesn't make anything, and therefore China certainly couldn't buy anything at all from the United Kingdom. But when you realise that UK is still the world's 6th largest producer of finished goods, 6th largest exporter of goods, that flies in the face of everything you hear in the British media. In 2008, China imported $10 billion worth of goods from China. That was actually quite low. We're now back up well above that figure, increase on 2009, yes, it was a bad year. It's close to 50% increase, and it's going to be a record year. And with the pound being quite low, that's extremely good news and encouraging for British companies. What we sell to China, and I'll come on to the end, is basically in comparison, what do we buy from China? 50% of what we sell to China is high-end, high-value, high technology, high innovation, engineered products. 50% of what we buy from China are toys and clothes. So we often hear things like, oh, the China market, they just want cheap goods. You actually look at what they buy from us and then what we buy from China, and surely it should be the Chinese who say they only want cheap goods. And the demand is vast, and the demand is increasing, and the demands are opening at a rate which even surprised us in the last 12 months. So summing it up, it's China buys high-value products and services. But this evening we're going to talk about products. When you look at the balance of trade figures, which are again thrown around in the British media, it looks on face value that China's trade balance with us, they export to us 3 times more than they buy from us, and that's true of finished goods. But we heard reference already to Chinese students in the UK. We estimate that the Chinese student market is worth somewhere in the region of £2 billion a year to the UK economy. If you include fees, accommodation, travel, and all the expenses that all the students have. It's very significant. £2 billion goes a long way. Then you have all the service industries. You have the HSBCs, the Standard Charters of this world, the KPMGs and PwCs, who have offices across China, and in accountancy, they are actually the dominant companies in China. They make money in China. They remit funds back to the UK, to UK invested shareholders. You then have estimates, or best estimates, are somewhere in the region of 4,000 British enterprises in China. Yes, some of them, because in China, like France, if you want to set up your company, you have to register in every city you're in. So Tesco's has to have 100 different companies in China. Each is their own store. But of those 4,000, there's a significant number of those companies who are small manufacturers who've invested, sent some machinery to China and are supplying it to the Chinese market. They're making money in China. And that, again, is not on the balance of trade figures which you normally see. So the actual reality of the situation is hard to gauge, but it's certainly not. Our balance of trade is we only export 3 times what we import from China. It's certainly much, much closer to 2/5, 3/5, possibly not exactly the same. Okay. There are some interesting trends in China. Some of them are quite complicated, and they get very complicated when you get down to regional, provincial areas. But overall, currently there are around about 450 million-ish of the 1,300 million people who live in large towns and cities. In the next 10 years, that's another 150 million people are going to move to large towns and cities. So that's an extra Britain and France. There you go. What a market. We just suddenly introduced 2 vast countries into the world market. But they're becoming picky. Friends of mine are really picky. And they are demanding as much as they could possibly get for their cash, and they have more disposable income than we do. So there is a demand for better services, education and health, food, clothing, and entertainment. It's a small part of what Britain exports, but we are seeing a huge number of UK companies selling everything from biscuits and tea through to the high street retailers, to getting into China and doing very well, very easily, very quickly. And then there's demand for better infrastructure, so better roads, better rail, better housing, better environmental issues. To give you just one very quick example of that, I just came back from Guangzhou. I lived there for 8 years before I joined CBBC. And because of the Asian Games, they've just tarmacked all the major roads. There you go. Just, within a couple of months, we just decided we're going to tarmac the city. And they did it. And of course, they did it to make the roads much smoother. And it's reduced air pollution instantly. It was actually a friend of mine in China who piloted it in one of the regions of Guangzhou. So he's rather happy that what he did 6 years ago is now extended across the whole city. But then they also put in proper traffic lights and proper pedestrian crossings, and drivers actually pay attention to them. So I loved it when I was in Shanghai, having to say to my colleagues in Shanghai, especially Chinese colleagues in Shanghai, that I know you guys think you're the most cultured people in China, but did you know that people actually stop at traffic lights in Guangzhou? They didn't quite like that.